Please welcome Robert DeBaker, Global Brand President, Becca Cosmetics.
Hey, good morning. Forgive me if I'm distracted. I'm a little concerned that I have a Patronus and I got to figure out what it is. So, okay, great. That was fantastic, actually. But just made me laugh. I'm like, wow, do I really have one of those? The concept of talking about what's the influencer evolution when presented to me was a bit daunting because I think you'll all agree it's so important to what we do and it's so integral to the way we're all approaching our consumer habits, let alone how we're manufacturing our ideas for the way we bring products to market and drive our brand equity. Yet it has changed so dramatically and so quickly that it presents such a great challenge to talk to you all about what's the evolution, because I think I'm going to do the best I can to give it to you what I think is going to happen. And it'll be in the context of what I've learned and how things have happened within Becca. But I think the truth is we're going to all understand that the speed of the way things have moved and the different dynamics that are involved present a real difficulty in figuring out where we go from here. So I think the best thing I could do was, first I would say to you, I'm thankful for the influencer movement, and as much as we would all say we're frustrated about understanding where do we go next, the things I would say about being thankful about the influencer movement is I think the best and most powerful thing the influencer movement has done is truly put the power of what's going on in our industry in particular, but I think across the board as consumers, into the hands of the consumer. We've learned in a beauty industry that very much was sort of top-down, that influencers, which are all were born out of being consumers themselves, have made us become better marketers direct to the consumer. There's a lesson in that we can never forget as this continues to evolve, and I'm thankful that that's happened. I think we all should be. So the then and now that I want to view is through I'll give you as a lens of first a quick snapshot of the way I see things, but then also through the experiences that we've had at Becca. So then, beauty influencer wasn't even a term that was widely used as recently as 2015. We didn't talk about influencers. We didn't use the word. There were genuine reviews. There was a real interest in seeing what was the latest haul video. Remember the haul video? Now it's sort of lost its luster because the now is that we send all the product to the influencers. There's no haul. That was self-purchase. When we met Jaclyn Hill and had this amazing idea that ended up coming to life as Champagne Pop, it was because Jaclyn went out and bought the product herself. We didn't seed our highlighter to her. She bought it. There was an authenticity that came from that. And there was a moment there where consumers were deciding what was the most important thing to be part of a video. This birthed the whole influencer movement. It was very authentic, it was very genuine, it wasn't about self-promotion, it was about a genuine love for the product, how to use the product, how to teach others about the product. And it was the best idea that came really out of product reviews that we were all starting to understand on the websites where we like to purchase. The now is the major influencers have celebrity-like status. The products are gifted, they're not purchased. It's a pay-to-play mentality. There are, forget about the collaborations and the things we've learned about our experience with Jaclyn Hill, but think about the people who are paid to post. The offer to not only try the product, but to invite to an event, make you fall in love with our brand, give you all the products, and then pay you to post about the products. And now we also see, obviously, the huge surge of influencer-led brands. It's been commented several times today that the barrier to entry is so low. And we look at what's happened with what we'd call influencer-led brands and see what's happened, you recognize that that's the case. So as a snapshot view, I would say I'd like to go back to the then. It was the good old days of the influencer movement because it was very real and very genuine. But the truth is those days as we know it were quickly over. So what I thought I'd do is give you a look through the Becca experience of the influencer evolution. And recognize that for us in 2014, we're probably late in the year, and we had started to understand through two platforms that we use to market our brand, which I'll openly admit we did because they were free. We had no other budget. So Instagram and YouTube became the only platform where you could talk about your brand, and we recognized that there were these people as I said before, getting the haul videos and starting to talk about the product. A woman on our team named Carrie Cole, who's our global brand ambassador, started recognizing that some of these things were happening and said, you know, I'm going to curate a collection of products that are personal to some of these people I've seen, and I'm going to contact them and ask them if it's okay if I send them some product. And she would personally select shades, ideas that matched what she thought was relevant to these specific people, still not called influencers, and send them out to them with a note that said, "Love, Carrie." It was a very authentic, very relatable moment that was an idea of interacting with someone who could be a consumer or could tell a friend and ask them to buy our products as well. This is 2014. It generates lots of product reviews, or we think it's causing a little bit of traction for us because we see Instagram growth and we see people following us on YouTube. Get to 2015. It was probably towards the beginning, it was January of 2015, where we had seen a post by a blogger named Jaclyn Hill that it took us until Wednesday of a week where we got a sales report on a Sunday where we saw a massive spike in the sales of one shade of our highlighters. And it took us until Wednesday of that week to understand that what had happened is that an influencer named Jaclyn Hill had posted about our highlighter. So we thought, wow, that was pretty amazing. That would be cool if that could happen again. And lo and behold, it did happen again because she used it in another video. And at that point, we said, we should really reach out to her. We should get to know her. It sounds so ridiculously stupid now that we actually thought about that because this is the moment we're in now. But the reach out to her, honestly, was to say thank you. And it wasn't to say, hey, here's a whole bunch of other products and we can talk about all these too. It was genuinely a wow, look what just happened. And I think it was whiplash for all of us to understand what could really happen to motivate your business and to see what happens in sales. From the date of meeting Jaclyn, genuinely over a lunch to say thank you, and over that lunch, the idea of, hey, we should really do something together. You want to do a highlighter? You love highlighters. I'm telling you, that's how innocent this whole thing broke. And through a conversation in January, we brought to life a product that was collaborated on in a highlighter. Interesting thing at that moment, those of you who have been, who share my age or my generation, you've been in this business a long time, the thought of putting someone's name on the box, on the package, as a collaboration now is a price of admission. It's a table stakes if you want to be involved in the influencer moment. But think back 2 years ago. If you can, put yourself in that mindset. How many of us were really willing to put someone's name on the package that wasn't the name of the person or of the brand? Let alone someone who just is this face on the internet. It's not a spokesperson, it's not a model, it's not a someone who's famous in the whole world. It's this influencer thing. We took that risk because we really believed that there was traction to what we had going on. But the point here is to say, that was a moment, and that was only 2 years ago. Okay, so we move forward, and as we saw things moving, from 2015 when we launched Champagne Pop, it's really hard for me to believe that that is truly only 30 months ago. We moved from 2015 into 2016, a much more dramatic influencer moment that was a collaboration that included now a platform. In the activation of our Becca x Jaclyn Hill Champagne collection, we tied together a Snapchat drop launch, activate in one moment, put it for sale during a launch event, tell people only through Snapchat, drive them to the Sephora digital app, and through this great partnership of Sephora and Jaclyn Hill and Becca, we're able to drive over 26,000 units sold in 90 minutes. That sounds amazing through the lens of what that time was, and I would tell you I wish the good old days were still here, because I honestly believe the chance of doing that is very, very slim, if not over, because it's become more part of the routine. My point for bringing that up and then talking about how that whole thing came together with the idea of where did we go from, hey, let's do a product together, hey, let's put your name on the package, hey, let's have this massive blown out thing, and that we also tie in a retailer and we tie in a platform. All of that now, we're still talking about only a 24-month period of time. In 2017, we collaborated with Chrissy Teigen. That move for us was a moment of recognizing influencers themselves want to be celebrities. And there's nothing more that an influencer wanted to become attached to than a celebrity themselves. So we created a moment with someone who was very much on brand. Chrissy Teigen, I think we could all agree, is very much, if you know anything about our brand, it's very much like Becca. She looks like our brand, she speaks like our brand, she represents our brand so incredibly well. And there was this great moment of patching together a celebrity who is really an influencer in her own right, along with influencers tied to the program. Now, this isn't my 5 minutes of bragging about Becca's experience. It's really an opportunity to share with you so obviously how quickly things have moved and the evolution that we've all lived through. I think that what's so important to take out of this is that the time, the speed that this has gone has to be indicative for how we all think about where are we going from here with the influencer moment. The one thing that I can tell you that for sure is true is that I do believe that the authenticity, the relatability of the influencers we choose is becoming more and more important, which I'll talk about in a moment, and something that we feel was very much a part of our Chrissy Teigen moment. So what these 5 circles represent is what we believe the pace has been of going from a fundamental shift of being brand-led to being an influencer-led brand or an influencer-led consumer relationship experience. What I would tell you is the first circle, brand spokesperson, existed, we could probably all agree, for at least 40 years. And a brand spokesperson was generally through a manufactured state of awareness for the person you chose as a brand spokesperson. Meaning, we didn't go out and seek brand people, most brands didn't, of someone who was authentically on brand, who really fit our equity, who really fit and wanted to speak in our voice. The idea was go find somebody who's really famous, put their name into what you're doing, get them to pose for pictures, put it out there because it'll draw more people to you and we create a moment. And we all lived through the huge burst of celebrity fragrances and all the other ways that, going back to the days of Isabella Rossellini or beyond, to the models that we associated with brands. Those other 4 circles are the last 18 months. That first circle is the last 40 years. The pace at which this is changing, because the power is in the hands of the consumer who is following with a device in her hands that is both a point of sale and a point of relationship, is moving so fast that how you evolve and decide what to do about influencers cannot be only in the ecosphere of, gee, what do I do about influencers? It has to be taken in the whole context of the way things are moving with the consumer, with the platforms, and with the marketplace. I think where we've landed today is a really interesting point, and what I would ask you is sort of an interesting moment. You know, there's the thought of where we go next with influencers and what's really happening with them. As I contemplated that the most, one of the things that dawned on me was we could all stand here. If I had a whiteboard and I said, throw out the names, you all make a list, and then tell me what you came up with the list as the top 10, top 15 big-time beauty influencers. I would be surprised if our lists varied by more than 1 or 2 people. Because the truth is, the people who were huge 15, 18 months ago are huge right now. Has anyone new emerged? I don't think so. If anyone has emerged, it's not more than 5. Of the big names that we know we would count on that can move the mark when it comes to influencer consumer engagement that can really drive sales. I think that's very telling. I think that what that tells us is the opportunity to grow to be 2 million, 3 million, 5 million, 10 million followers and create some kind of traction and create influence to move the mark on sales has changed to the point where those that are there are going to be there. And it's why I think we all sort of organically moved to this idea of micro-influencers, those people who had 100,000, 200,000 followers, and so on. I think the most important point about that movement, number one, it's interesting to contemplate all the reasons why we're not seeing a surge in big number followers, influencers. I think that layer of what we call micro-influencers, we're all in love with, and so are consumers, because there's a certain authenticity. They haven't been yet paid a lot of money. They haven't yet been given a ton of product. It's still genuine. It's still authentic. I guess what the other major factor that I think you have to consider is, what are consumers really looking for? And what I would ask you, or encourage you all to think about here, is that I believe we're also in a moment of time where, as in the beauty industry in particular, I happen to live in a household where I have a really interesting dynamic. I have a very beauty-savvy, well-informed, great makeup artist, professional woman for a wife. with a 15-year-old who's incredibly detail-oriented about her own makeup and super involved in the influencer world. In that dynamic 15 years ago, my wife would be teaching my daughter how to do makeup and what her skincare should look like. It's totally the other way around. If I come home with a new product from Becca and my 15-year-old daughter said, I don't really like that, my wife won't wear it. The influence, and that's not just my household. I'm sure any of you have teenage daughters can agree, the influence movement is changing, where the influence is coming up. A younger audience, a younger consumer is so knowledgeable about what's going on with product in our category because she's engrossed in the videos. She's engrossed in the content. She follows so many different people. She has more time to do it than those of us who have to work for a living, but she also has a ton of content available to her, and she's not watching television anymore. She's not even looking at Netflix as much. She's looking at her device, and she's paying attention to those videos, and she's learning so much more. But what that consumer is telling us through everything that she learns and everything that she's doing is authenticity is important to her. Genuine trust is important to her. It's way more valuable. Right now, I know there's going to be a lot of talk today about the words authenticity and things that are related to the digital moment. That word, to me, has become overused, but it couldn't ever, to me, has never also been more important. And how you define that for your brand and how you identify how you're going to match together, which influencers you choose to work with, how you choose to have them come to life. You can't control what they say. We all can look at brands that have gone through tough moments with things that have happened in recent times and see influencers that they paid money to, that they invited to events, who advocated on their behalf, turned around and spoke against those brands and the issues they've just recently dealt with. So, but that's real and that's authentic. But where's the line? We paid them, but they have to remain authentic. We paid them to advocate on behalf of our brand, but they have to make sure their followers see them as genuine. We're creating a very tough moment, and we're all living in the midst of these influencers who've been paid who have to maintain authenticity. And it's a tougher game for them, but I think the challenge is on us as brands because ultimately the consumer will not make the judgment call on the influencer. They're going to make the judgment call on the brand. The other dynamic thing I think you have to pay attention to is what's going on with what we all know is happening on platforms. And I won't go into it in great detail, but I think you'd all agree with me that what's going on Facebook is probably also going on Instagram. Algorithms are changing. It's an inevitability. You can't fight it. We can't change it. And I think the thing I'd suggest to everyone is we all need to look at the platforms, and this is so integral to the relationship we have with influencers. Something's changing on the platforms. And in my mind, I view the social media platforms as a media. It's a paid media. And we're really going to reach a day really soon where the idea of paying to boost your post, if we're not already there, is the equivalent of negotiating so that you can always have the back page of the best magazines. It's a new day, but it's the same idea as what we lived with in that era. This seems to be the direction that digital is going. If you want to know what's going on and we really want to understand how this is going to hurt us or help us and how we play in the game, I'm not the first person to say it. The old saying is follow the money. Follow the money. And the money is going to these social media platforms as a media agency or as a media buy, I should say, in order to boost your post and to create awareness. It's impacting what happens with the people and the genuine authenticity of what we have going on. Take a look at Anastasia's post. That's their post. We couldn't agree more. The impact that this is having on the up-and-comers. I would suggest that in today's environment, as compared to where we were 3 years ago, it would be incredibly difficult for a brand like Becca to grow at the pace that we grew between 2013 and 2016 because we had free access to platforms that are now going to be influenced. So, how to win? I can't give you the magic ticket. I wish I could because that means Estee Lauder would employ me for the rest of my life and I'd be in great shape. But what I will tell you is that there are three things I would suggest to you. The first thing is we cannot look at making an influencer strategy a substitute for your consumer relationship strategy. The influencer strategy is a segment of what your overall approach is to how you relate with your consumer. It's an important one, obviously, but it is only part of. And the choices that we make for our influencer strategy have to be informed by our brand equity strategies, as well as what are our true goals for consumer relationship. And it is not, I can't stress enough that the consumer relationship strategy has to be embedded to what's real and authentic about your brand, and the influencers you choose have to match the voice and feel of what your brand's all about. I would say, as I said earlier, as the second one is the view the path to and from influencers as a media moment. This is when you package together my thinking that we are seeing the surge in, or not a surge, in million-plus followers on Instagram and new followers, or I'm sorry, new influencers emerging on YouTube, that tells me something about what's happening in the moment. So and then match that up, by the way, with what's happening with the pay-to-play feeling, not only with influencers, but what we're seeing on platforms. And you put those two together, and it suggests that we need to look at this moment as a media buy moment, as much as what are you doing to, say, attract certain influencers. I would say the last point I would say is echoing something I said earlier as well, which is on where we're going with influencers. I encourage all of us to pay attention to what's going on with Gen Z, because the millennial generation is definitely a digitally native generation, but the Gen Z audience will be native to the influencer moment. They grew up with it. They had it in their hands from day one of interacting with product. If you need proof that the influencer moment and things that are happening digitally are important, how many of you have someone in the house who likes to make slime? Take a look at the number of followers that your kids, of the influencers doing slime that your kids are following. We're talking millions. And they're selling slime over Instagram in bucket loads. I have Elmer's glue in my living room to prove it. But it's not just my household. You pay attention to what's going on with the Gen Z consumer and how she's relating or he's relating to what the influencers are doing. What I see from what I think is so unique, when I watch in my own little microcosm of my daughter and her friends, but I think we can agree this is happening across the board. This Gen Z consumer is immediately believing what they read and what they see in these posts or in the videos. It's no different than when we learned to read the newspaper or read different things, and we'd say, if I read it, it must be true. This age group is, if I saw it in a video or I saw it in a post, it must be true. The difference is the quick disconnect when someone goes off the reservation with bad ideas or is inauthentic or lies, or it says something and then it's found out that that person was paid to say it. There is a quick and immediate disconnect from that influencer, from that moment. This audience is so willing to believe, but is just as quick to dismiss, which makes authenticity a premium. So as the influencer moment evolves, I think what we need to be paying attention to is how this native to the influencer movement consumer is advocating with what they do with the influencers. Last point before I close would be to say, if you haven't seen an article that ran in the New York Times, I believe it was just within the last couple of weeks, about fake followers, to me it's an even bigger issue than fake news. And the reason I say that is because you read the article and you'll understand there are companies out there that are selling followers. You can go buy followers. And the article points out numerous situations where bots are being created as if they are individual people. That's part of what they're selling. We're all making decisions about the investments we make in the influencer world and about who we use. And the people who are being valued as big-time influencers are suddenly showing up as having half their followers being bots. They're not real. I believe what's going to happen in that moment with the influencers is, again, as I said earlier, when consumers find it out, there will be a massive distaste for that's what's gone on. They will not turn on their influencers. They will turn on brands because they expect us to have done the homework and to recognize what was real and what wasn't real. We'll be the ones who get punished for it. So with that, thank you for your time. I appreciate everything. Happy to take your questions. Allison.
pay your influencers, and how did you decide if you pay them to do posts or if you were not going that way?
We don't pay influencers for posts. We don't pay for content unless it's related to a collaboration that we've done. It's the only time we've paid for that interaction. And our choice to do so has been exactly to the point I was sharing earlier. We believe that we keep a better authenticity. We do a big event that's called a Becca. We invite influencers to that event. We don't put restrictions on how much they post. We don't require them to post. We don't pay them to attend. It's a brand moment. And we're treating it as sort of like in the old ways we used to treat PR events. Pete?
Hi. This is a great presentation.
Thank you, Pete.
If you have an influencer that becomes very closely identified with the brand, what do you do when she leaves?
It's a loaded question, Pete. I think that what you do when she leaves is you better be sure. To me, the pace of the way you're interacting with influencers is the same way your pace should go on how you're ideating product and how it's going to be calendarized. We've had a relationship with Jaclyn Hill that's lasted well over 2 years. There's a great bond there. There's a great relationship to something that was very genuine and true to our brand. But Jaclyn continues to go on and do other things, and we've gone on to do other things. I think if you patch together a meaningful relationship, the move away from one another ends up being organic and feels normal. If you have something that ends with a very harsh breakup or a very harsh disconnect and you move on to someone else and you sort of throw the whole thing away, I think the consumer is going to recognize that as, well, that was really just sort of like a brand spokesperson thing, and you changed the model that you were talking with, sort of like what we did back in the 80s and 90s. So I think the idea of how you move away gets solved by how you create the relationship and treat it along the way.
Over here.
Yeah.
Hi, you just mentioned influencer brand trips. So trips to Paris, where influencers are invited to talk about the products on their own free will. Do you think that these trips are actually cost-effective in getting its consumer attention? And do you think that influencer kind of outreach is going to decrease as years go by?
Last part of your question one more time.
Do you think that Instagrammers and influencers are still going to have the same amount of power they do right now?
Great question.
Or do you think it's going to decrease as different forms of communication come about?
Yeah, clear. First part, do I think it's a cost? Is it worthwhile to bring influencers to an event? Does it have power? Yeah, I absolutely do think it's important. And I think it's especially important when it's tied to something that's very specific to build your brand equity or to drive immediate transactions, conversion on a specific launch. But I think the key to every one of the influencer moments is they can't just be because you wanted to have a party and see if the influencers would post about your brand. It has to be linked to something that's authentically about what your brand stands for, whether it's a product, whether it's your brand equity position, whether it's the way you're choosing to relate to consumers. There has to be depth. It can't just be a party. The second part, do I believe influencers and Instagram will be as powerful going forward? I don't see it changing. I think it's the thing that we're in at this moment, and the consumer is telling us that what happens that she can see in her hand, on her device, is the most important thing to her that's going to drive her purchasing decisions and drive her relationship decisions. So I think as long as that's real, there may be other platforms that emerge, or there may be other ways you go about it, but until something that's so obvious starts to come out, I think we're all trying to test and learn about certain other platforms and different things that might happen. But until then, and particularly for a North American or a Western consumer, I think Instagram is really not changing as the priority.
We have time for one more question.
Hi, how are you?
Hey.
Great presentation. So quick question, with consumers being channel agnostic and Facebook and Instagram changing the algorithm, do you see a bigger investment and kind of focus on YouTube, and where does that fall into your ecosystem?
I wouldn't say I see it as a bigger investment in YouTube for today because of those reasons. But I think any place that you, and particularly YouTube, where you can put up as much content as possible that's educational, that leads the consumer to understanding your products better and how to use them, not only in relation to your own products, but to the other product choices she makes, I think then that platform is incredibly important. So I think YouTube is and will remain until some other video type content platform emerges as key. I think it's absolutely critical. I don't think it changes because of the algorithms. It could be argued that it becomes more valuable, but I think it's already so incredibly valuable and important. All right, thank you very much.